Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I'm Rabbi Susan Abramson, coming to you from the sanctuary of Temple Shalom Emeth in Burlington, Massachusetts. And it is the 76th anniversary after the liberation of Auschwitz, marking the end of World War II and the Holocaust. And the pain persists, and the traits of human nature which caused the Holocaust to happen in the first place continued to be alive and well, unfortunately, in humanity. And so with each passing year, the actual victims of the Holocaust are fewer and fewer amongst us. However, we have to keep their memory alive because we have to keep that type of behavior from ever happening again. And so that's why we have this service every year, to honor the millions and millions of victims, as well as to keep that hope alive that we can improve the nature of our society and minimize hate and increase the love amongst us. So we've got a very special service for you this evening, conducted by members of our interfaith clergy as well as members of our religious school. We also are featuring prayers by Josh Levine, who is becoming a bar mitzvah this weekend. Tonight's service also features a talk by Alan Langer, who is the son of Holocaust survivors. Actually, Alan himself was born in a DP camp after his parents were liberated from Bergen Belsen. He happens to be my financial advisor. He's from Tucson, but these days you can be anywhere and participate in our services. So Shabbat Shalom.
This is a song by cantor Marshall Portnoy. It's called I Still Believe. It's a very interesting and very touching song in which he imagines what Anne Frank might be saying and thinking as she looks out her window in the place where she was confined for so many years as her family hid from the Nazis. It's kind of a combination of emotions of sadness and also hope, which are the emotions I think we all feel when we think of the Holocaust and even some of the things that are going on today. Shining stars and cloudless skies of blue, through the window crack I see you, and I long to run and touch the sun. Dear diary, what else can I do? Growing up and longing for a friend, hoping that our secret life will end in words of light written in the night, my thoughts and hopes and dreams to you I send. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people really are good at heart, and the skies will be bright, and it will all come right, and the springtime of peace will start. Dreaming of the precious air of freedom, waking and I feel like crying. There's no place to go, but still I know skies are clearing, birds are flying. Happiness and love that I can share in a world of truth and beauty. When the thunder's near and when I fear, the light of morning dawn will come to me. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people really are good at heart, and the skies will be bright, and it will all come right, and the springtime of peace will start. and the skies will be bright, and it will all come right, and the springtime of peace will start.
Now I'd like to introduce Josh Levine, who is going to light the Shabbat candles for us this evening in honor of his bar mitzvah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu b'hadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu L'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen, 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 amen.
It is hard to understand why people kill each other. It is even harder to think that 6 million Jews and 5 million people of other faiths were murdered by the Nazis. It is hard to understand how or why this horrible tragedy took place. But we must never forget, for if we forget that it happened, it could happen again.
Please rise in body or in spirit for the Baruch Hu, our call to worship.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv arivim, b'chakma poteach she'arim, uvitbuna mishenei itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umsader et hachochavim, v'mishmarotehem barkia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, umavir yom umevi layla, umavdil bein yom uvein layla, Adonai Sevaot Shemo, El Chai v'chayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai hamariv aravim.
O God, how can we know you? Where can we find you? You are as close to us as breathing, yet you are farther than the farthermost star. You are as mysterious as the vast solitudes of the night, yet as familiar to us as the light of the sun.
In the 1930s, Hitler and the Nazis began to teach people that the Jews were an inferior race of people. They made the Jews leave their homes and live in overcrowded apartments with not enough food or money.
We remember the 210,000 Jews who were killed in Germany and Austria.
The Nazis began to convince more people that their lives would be better without the Jews. In November 1938, on a night we called Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, they destroyed many of the Jews' stores and burned down their beautiful synagogues. We remember the 90,000 killed in France.
Then the Nazis told people that the Jews must be annihilated in order to purify the world. They began to send the Jews to labor camps, where they told the Jews they would have a better life. Instead, they had to work all day for the Nazis, digging ditches or breaking rocks in the hot sun. All they were given to eat was little bits of bread and watered down soup. When they got too weak to work, the Nazis killed them. We remember the 450,000 Jews who were killed in Hungary.
For over 5 years, the Nazis made more and more Jews leave their homes and move to concentration camps or ghettos. There, the sick, the old, and the young were separated from their family and killed. We remember the 75,000 Jews who were killed in Slovakia.
When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives and we can begin to change the world. And then you live within our hearts, and we, through righteousness, behold your presence. May it be so. So be it.
Continue with the Shema on page 152. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty, forever and ever.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Now please be seated.
V'yahavta e Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha. V'chayu hadvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha. V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta ba'am b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'letecha v'derech uv'shafpacha u'kumecha u'kshartam le'al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot bein einecha u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. L'man tizkru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim le'Elohehem. Ani Adonai Elohehem, asher hotzeti ethem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lehem Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohehem, Adonai Elohehem Emeth. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments, and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai, your God.
Many Jews did not let the Nazis kill them without struggling to stay alive. Many Jews helped each other find enough food and clothing, though the Nazis wanted them to starve. There were many Christians who risked their own lives by hiding Jews in their homes and helping them to escape. Remember the 40,000 Jews that were killed in Belgium.
Some young Jews began to steal guns and ammunition. They fought against the Nazis and helped many people escape to countries where they could live in safety. We remember the 600,000 Jews who were killed in Romania.
Soon there were so many Jews fighting the Nazis in certain communities that it took a long time, sometimes even years, for the Nazis to defeat them. We remember the 3 million Jews who were killed in Poland. Among them were the Jews who fought to defend the Warsaw Ghetto.
You shall not oppress your neighbors, nor rob them. You shall not stand idle while your neighbor bleeds. Violence shall no longer be heard in your land, desolation and destruction within your borders. All your children will be taught of your God, and great shall be the peace of our children.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh, mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nora tehilot, osef tele, Nora tehilot, osef tele, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe uMiriam. Ze Eli anu v'yamru, Ze Eli anu v'yamru. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed.
We now continue with the second section of our service called the Tefillah, which means the prayer. It's a time when we speak directly to God and thank God for being the God of our ancestors and for giving us strength and giving us peace.
Anananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagi tehilatecha. Ananananana Adonai. Ananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagi tehilatecha. Ananananana Adonai. Ananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagi tehilatecha. Ananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagi tehilatecha. Ananananana Adonai. Ananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagi tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei Hakol, v'Zoher Hasdei Avod v'Imachot, u'Mevi Geula livnei v'neihem l'man Shmo v'Ahava. Melech Ozer u'Mashiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Be'ezrat Sarah.
Your might, O God, is everlasting. Help us to use our strength for good. You are the source of life and blessing. Help us to lift up the fallen. You are the author of freedom. Help us to free the captives. You are our hope in death as in life. Help us to keep faith with those who sleep in the dust. Your might, O God, is everlasting. Help us to use our strength for good and not for evil. You are holy, your name is holy, and all those who strive to be holy declare your glory day by day. We praise you, Eternal One, the Holy God. Amen.
The most powerful weapons the Jews possessed against the Nazis were their religion and their traditions. By secretly praying, observing Jewish holidays, and learning about their Judaism, the Jews maintained their faith and hope, even though they lived under terrible conditions. We remember the 60,000 Jews who were killed in Greece.
The following poem was written by Eva Pikova, a 12-year-old girl who was forced to live in a ghetto. It gives us some insight into how desperately the Jews hoped that things would get better.
Today, the ghetto knows different fear. Close in its grip, death holds an icy knife. An evil sickness spreads a terror in its wake. The victims of its shadow weep and writhe.
Today, a father's heartbeat tells his fright, and mothers bend their heads into their hands. Now children choke and die from typhus here. A bitter tax has been taken from their hands. We remember the 228,000 Jews who died in the Baltic countries.
My heart still beats inside my chest, while friends depart for other worlds. Perhaps it's better, who can say, than watching this, to die today.
Oh no, my God, we want to live, not watch our numbers melt away. We want to have a better world. We want to work. We must not die. We remember the 900,000 Jews who died in Ukraine.
Many Jews who lived under the threat of the Holocaust formed groups
and went to live in Palestine before the Nazis got to them. We remember the 105,000 Jews who were killed in the Netherlands.
Thousands of Jews tried to flee to the United States, but there were strict quotas here, and many were turned away. An ocean liner called the St. Louis brought hundreds of refugees to our shores, but our government forced the boat to return to Europe, where most of the passengers were killed by the Nazis. We remember the 352,000 Jews who were killed in Russia.
By the end of the war, 6 million Jews had been murdered, along with 5 million people of other faiths. But millions of Jews also survived. When the Americans came to liberate them, they found many who were so malnourished that they were hovering between life and death. Most of them could not return to their homes because they had been destroyed. Many were separated from their families and had no way of knowing which relatives were still alive. We bear witness to the 11 million. Their memories live on in us.
The Holocaust reminds us that freedom is precious. It reminds us that there are many people around the world today who are oppressed because of their race, religion, ethnic background, sexual orientation, and their place in society. They need our help.
First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
Shalom Rav Yisraelam Hadasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisraelam Hadasim Le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon le'ol ha'shalom. Ki ata hu adon le'ol ha'shalom. Shalom Rav Yisraelam Hadasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisraelam Hadasim Le'olam. V'tov beinecha levarech Eitan HaYisrael B'chol leidu B'chol sha'ah B'shlomecha. Shalom Rav Yisraelam Hadasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisraelam Hadasim Le'olam. Hadasim Le'olam.
God of peace, of justice, and of love be praised. Inspire us to banish forever hatred, war, and bloodshed. Help us to establish forever one human family united in peace. God of peace, bless us with peace. We must never forget the horrible things that happened in the Holocaust, because if we forget and allow the world to forget, it could happen again.
We now continue with the Misha Berach, which is a special get well prayer, which we sing every Friday night during our services. And on this Friday night, we really say a Misha Berach or a healing prayer for all of us who have endured what we've endured this past year. And we tonight is put into perspective, no matter what trials and tribulations we've had to endure, imagining what our Jewish ancestors had to endure during the years of the Holocaust. So we say Misha Berach for all of those who continue to survive after the Holocaust and for ourselves and our country.
Misha Berach Avotinu Mikor habracha le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu, mekor habracha la'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
We now continue with another song for peace, O say Shalom.
O say Shalom, bimromav, huya aseh Shalom, aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. O say Shalom, bimromav, huya aseh Shalom, aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. O say Shalom, bimromav, huya aseh Shalom, aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. O say Shalom, bimromav, huya aseh Shalom, aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen.
Now I'd like to introduce our special speaker this evening, Alan Langer. Every year I try to find an actual Holocaust survivor to tell their actual story. As you know, with every passing year that becomes harder and harder to do, and I was racking my brain trying to figure out how I could find a Holocaust survivor, and a little voice in my head said, you know, Alan, who's my financial advisor, always tells me the story about his father, who was a baker in the concentration camps, and how that enabled him to survive, and how he was born in a DP camp. I've been hearing this for many years now, and so I thought, why not ask him? He's in Tucson, Arizona, but why not have him participate in our virtual service this evening? So it's my pleasure to introduce Alan Langer, who has contributed much money to form a Holocaust museum in Tucson, where he will be speaking from, and he will tell you the story of his parents, the amazing story of their survival and their journey, as well as his own. So take it away, Alan.
Emotional at any point. Every time I enter this room, this facility, it brings back a lot of emotions, going back a lot of years for me. So let me talk about the experience as best as I know it. The facts aren't going to be exact. I may mispronounce some of the names. You know, I'm going to speak from what I heard from my parents for so many years. So Esther and Reuben Langer were born in 1920. They were first cousins. Reuben was born in Jarnowicz, Poland. Esther was born in Kętrzyn, Poland. That was the Kelts province that both of those towns were in, miles apart. And after a few years, they both lived in the same city. Same age, had a relatively stable life for many, many years. Reuben had 4 siblings. and his parents that he lived with, and Esther had 6 siblings before the war began. 1939 changed everything. September 1939, the Nazis marched into their town and brought everybody out of the houses in preparation for marching them to the labor camps or the concentration camps, in some cases death camps, on that day. Esther, at the very last moment, was able to get her mother's jewelry, which consisted of a large gold bracelet, weighed about a pound, a ring belonging to her mother that had her mother's initials engraved on it, Olive Lamed, and a gold watch. And she gave that jewelry to a schoolgirl friend, a Gentile, non-Jewish friend, for safekeeping, knowing that if she carried those into the labor camp, that the Nazis would most certainly take that away from her. Reuben, on the other hand, had very little of material value to take with him into the labor camps, but what he took was very important to him and really aided his survival through all of this. He took a violin. He had taken lessons for many, many years, and he took his ability to bake, which was key in his survival as we now look back. Reuben's father was a baker in Jarnovich. He always talked about learning how to bake when he was age 4. In reality, he delivered bread on his bicycle, had a bicycle with 2 baskets, as he described it to me, and delivered bread all those years and certainly knew how to bake. As they were marched into the labor camps, they left their siblings to go wherever the Nazis took them, and their parents, and many of which, and I'll tell you the numbers later on in the conversation, they never saw again. But going into labor camps, 19 years old, each 19 years old, Esther, from the stories that I've always heard, don't know what the time frame was in 5 labor camps, including the last one being really a concentration camp, and some called it a death camp, and I'll tell you about that as well. Well, she was able to work for a period of time, but this began what I would refer to as the survival process, because that's all this was. These people didn't have a chance to look ahead, didn't know what their future was going to be day to day, and they practiced what is true survival. Esther, on a day-to-day basis in the early days, was aided by the very same friend that she gave the jewelry to, where she would come by the barbed wire fence in the labor camp and throw a bundle of food, whatever she could get, over to her at a designated time. Talked about an apple, a piece of bread. There wasn't a lot of food, you know, the country was at war, but this friend, a true friend, a saint, helped my mother survive in the early days. My father, on the other hand, practiced self-survival, had a violin, played the violin for the Nazis. They loved him for it. Acted like he enjoyed it. He really didn't enjoy it, but certainly knew how to survive. And the biggest thing that he had was the ability to bake bread. The Nazis recognized that immediately, put him in the kitchen along the way to bake bread for the Nazis, not for the Jews, not for the prisoners, but for the Nazis. So he always had food. He always told the story that he didn't lose a lot of weight through the camps. His friends, many of them had lost 100 pounds a year into the war. You know, he had friends that were in the bunks that weighed 60, 70 pounds. He always maintained his weight. Skinny man anyway, but maintained his weight because he was always around the kitchen, always around the bed that he baked. Furthermore, he practiced what we believe in our religion to try to help other people. He would almost on a daily basis smuggle bread out of the kitchen, take it back to the bunks to try to help someone else survive. And if he had gotten caught, of course, he could have gotten shot for that. And he tells the one story that's vivid in my memory that I think about all the time, about his friend that he grew up with, who was dying, weighed 60 pounds, hadn't had anything to eat for quite some time, and he brought 2 loaves of bread tied under his uniform on each leg into the bunk to give to his friend, and his friend had passed away 2 hours before. Excuse me. So this went on, this process went on for 4 years. You know, one story that I heard, and I'm not calling them my parents yet, I wasn't born at this time, so I'm calling them by their first name for a reason, then I'll refer to them as mom and dad, which they most certainly were to me. Esther tells a story in the camps of working in the factory, sewing Nazi uniforms, making Nazi uniforms, and an SS guard, because she was so ill at the time, malnutrition and ill, there was tremendous disease in all these labor camps, that she had difficulty working that day and sewing the uniforms that she was assigned to do. So an SS guard, a woman guard, pushed her into a sewing machine and she lost her finger. You can see in these photographs the finger is gone in every photo. And I grew up with that and never thought anything of it. And someone pointed that out to me, and I, hadn't thought about it for a lot of years. She went back into the bunks, and she had a friend who sewed it up without anesthesia. A needle and thread is the way they fixed that injury. So life was difficult. Life was not pleasant. The work was very, very hard. They managed to make it through 4 years of the labor camps. Then they entered into Bergen Belsen. Most separately, they hadn't seen each other since they were taken out of their homes, but they entered into Bergen Belsen. Now, Bergen Belsen, before the war and during the beginning of the war, was a German internment camp of some kind, a prison of some kind, don't know all the facts, designed for 10,000 inmates, 10,000 prisoners. At the height, from 43 to 45, I believe the dates are correct, when Bergen Belsen became a concentration camp, they had as many as 60,000 Jews in Bergen Belsen in a facility that was built for 10,000. They called that camp a death camp, concentration camp, but it was known as a death camp because there was virtually no food or water. Reuben talks about seeing the Jews on the sidewalk, drinking from the sidewalk, wastewater, whatever they can get, eating wood, whatever they could do to try to innately, most innately try to get some nutrition to survive a little longer. This was around 43. And Marianne, my wife, pointed out the other day in some material that she read that this was an attempt by the Germans, by the Nazis, to kill as many people as they could. So when they felt that they had to close the labor camps, that the Americans and the British, and especially the Russians, were coming, that they wanted to destroy as many people as they could as they put them into Bergen Belsen. Of the 60,000 people that were in Bergen Belsen, there were 3 names that I believe everyone in this room is going to be most familiar with. You now know about Reuben and Esther Langer, but you may have also heard of an unknown author, Anne Frank, who was in that camp as well. April of 1945, the war had ended. The British came in to liberate the camp, and what they saw was sheer horror. I heard a British commander speak at a talk that we had a few years ago. He talked about, as he walked into the camps, that the Jews, the prisoners there, who were emaciated, walk up to him when they realized that they were being liberated and tried to hug him, but he couldn't feel any strength in their arms. It was like feathers touching his body. They were so weakened by this experience. In fact, the average individual, young individuals coming into Bergen Belsen, lasted approximately, on average, 2.5 weeks. Healthy people coming into that camp died 2.5 weeks later for lack of any food, water. My father was in the bakery baking bread for the Nazis, so he had food. My mother became very, very ill. What was in that camp was typhus, typhoid fever, dysentery, you name it, the diseases were there. In fact, the British, as they walked down the streets of Bergen Belsen, saw 13,000 corpses laying on the side of the street. And in fact, in the 2 years that Bergen Belsen was in full operation, 50,000 Jews perished in that camp. 50, and there are around 60,000 left that were liberated by the British. They were told to go down the road, about 1.5 miles down the road, to Bergen Belsen 2, Bergen Belsen 2, which at one time had a hospital there, but it served as the displaced persons camp, the DP camp for these individuals. They had nowhere to go, so they walked down the street to the DP camp, and the British destroyed Bergen Belsen. They burned it down because they could not control the disease. I believe there's a museum there today, but the original camp is no longer there. Now in the DP camp, you may have think that survival ended. All these people survived. We've got 60,000 people in the DP camp. They've survived. The DP camps are not a pleasant place to be, but they did have food, and most certainly they had some freedom. So they started the survival process, which initially had to do with finding survivors, looking for family. Can you imagine? 6 years of being without your family, not knowing what happened to them, not knowing what happened to the parents and the siblings and the friends. They looked in the faces, as I did a few years ago. Marianne will verify this. As we went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. for the first time, there was a video on Bergen Belsen. It was a 20-minute video. She tells me, and I don't have a recollection of this, that I spent several hours in front of that video looking at the faces, trying to find someone familiar. The first person, or early in the process in the DP camp, my father found my mother, his first cousin. Hadn't seen her in 6 years. She was very, very ill. And he tells a story that he married her within days because he felt an obligation to help her survive. First cousins married back then. I guess I turned out okay. I don't have hair, but other than that, I don't think that is. But most certainly that was very common practice in Europe at that time. So he married my mother, and now I'm calling them my father and mother. They're officially my father and mother now because I was born there in 1948 in that DP camp. And I will tell you that the marriages, there were thousands of marriages in those early months in 45 and 46, right after the war. People trying to come back to some sort of a normal life and replenish what they had lost. My father, again, had 4 siblings. He found 1 brother, Uncle Herschel, lost 3 siblings, and his parents, never saw his parents again. My mother, who had 6 siblings, found 2 sisters, Aunt Fela and Aunt Hannah, who ended up in Palestine, who immigrated to Israel. But no one else was left. My parents didn't want to go to Israel my father especially was afraid, I hate to say it, of being in any place where there was a large concentration of Jews, because in his mind this was going to happen again. How could he not think that after that experience? So he didn't want to go to Israel because he knew that there would be a large concentration of Jews there. He wanted to go somewhere where he could hide, and much of that was true. You know, names were changed at the border. If there was a Jewish connotation, again, it hurts me to think that could happen. The names were changed to sound not Jewish, because they really felt that this was their plot in life and nothing was going to change. So they waited, and they heard about the U.S., and they waited till 1949. I was born in 48. And they boarded in 1949, once they got a visa to come to the U.S., on the USS Muir. This was a converted naval cutter that ran transports, that ran people from Germany, from Bremerhaven, Germany, had quite a few runs going back and forth. And they were even afraid of that because they heard the story of the Exodus. The boat that was turned away years before, and the plight of those people, because they were turned away by the Americans, was to go back to Nazi Germany and end up in gas chambers and concentration camps. But this is the manifest. My parents never saw this. I mean, they saw it firsthand, but Marianne found this on Ancestry.com, and it lists here Reuben Langer, my father, age 29, Erna Langer, Esther, I don't know where the name Erna came from, age 29, and Abraham Langer, my name is Abraham Israel, changed to Alan, age 21 months. So this was quite a find. I've got this in my office, and I show it quite often. It's terrific. My parents, the ketubah, the marriage certificate, my parents, when they were married in Bergen Belsen in the DP camp, upon liberation, we found these two documents after my parents passed away in an old leather briefcase. And the one that is striking, this is to certify that Reuben Langer was liberated from Bergen Belsen concentration camp by British forces April 15th, 1945. Pretty emotional when I saw that. Still brings in some emotion today. The one thing that gave me some confidence that there is good in the world, as Anne Frank said, that inherently she believed people were good, was during this time in the DP camp, they had the freedom to go back to their homes, and they were occupied by Poles and Germans, and not any opportunity to get their houses back or to try to live a life that they had had before the war. So they left all that behind. But my mother did find that German girlfriend that she had given my grandmother's jewelry to, and who had thrown food over the wall to her for all those months, and she returned the bracelet and the ring, and Marianne wears the ring. She's not wearing it today. During Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and I have the bracelet in our safety deposit box. I cherish that. It's worth, in gold, it's worth a lot, but to me, it's priceless. Priceless for the memories and this experience. My father in the DP camp continued to bake bread. And in Tucson, many, many years later, he used to go to the JCC on Thursdays, and he'd bake 400 loaves of challah, and he would donate that, and they would raise some money doing that. So he was always a baker. Always a baker. That didn't change. He also played the violin in the DP camp, and there he is in the background playing the violin. He knew a dozen songs, a dozen German, Polish, classical songs, and it got him through. Believe me, it just got him through the making of the bread and the playing of the violin. Got off the boat in New York. Ellis Island had already closed. Got off the boat in New York Harbor, past the Statue of Liberty. I was a baby, I don't remember, but I can only imagine what the motion was like. Entering this country and seeing the Statue of Liberty and what it stood for. Various Jewish groups that were sponsoring the Jews and finding them dwellings, places to live, and sometimes jobs. You know, they didn't speak a word of English. I don't think that my parents had a third-grade education. We spoke Yiddish at home all those years. Yiddish is my first language. I learned English primarily from starting school, public school. Didn't want to stay in New York. My father was adamant, I don't want to stay in New York. They had a place for him to stay in New York. Too many Jews in New York, large concentration of Jews. They're going to do it to us again. I can't stay here. I need to hide. So he petitioned and had his wishes, where my mother and my father, carrying me, went to Louisville, Kentucky. We lived in Louisville until I was age 20. My brother was born in Louisville in 1952. Lived next to an Orthodox synagogue, lived a few feet away from the JCC, had a nice life. My father every day got up, put on his white uniform, his baker's hat, his apron, got on the bus, went to work. That I recall every night. Built his first home in Louisville, Kentucky built the first home actually in 1951, and then built a larger house in 1952. Bought his first car, Buick Special, in 1954, paid cash for it. Didn't have a credit card, kept his cars for 25 years, and the food on the table. And in fact, he said to me many a time, and I remember him telling me, that if you can get up in the morning, if you can go to work, they allow you to go to work, and then they pay you, and you can take that money and go home and put food on the table. This is paradise, living in the U.S. And the food on the table was sacred. We grew up knowing that we didn't throw a morsel of food away. If there was food on the plate and we didn't eat it, my father ate it or he wrapped it up. Because he remembers to the day that piece of bread was the difference between life and death, and how could you ever throw food away? The survival process continued. People may think that the Nazis were out of the picture. These people survived the camps. There were psychiatrists and psychologists back then that said that these people cannot exist. They can't live their lives. How can they live their lives for what they went through? And they did. My mother all her life was very melancholy. Wanted to talk about what happened, wanted to talk about these experiences, wanted to talk about her parents, would list the names of her siblings that she never saw again, and my father would, for good or bad, stop her and say, we have to look forward. We have to be optimistic. Anyone here that knew my father will tell you that he had a big smile on his face, always a joke, a lot of happiness. I will tell you that internally, inside, there was tremendous pain, but he wouldn't let it control his life. He found a way to overcome all that and live his life for the future. Live his life for the next generation, for my brother and me. His successes, his pleasure came from seeing us doing well. We had to do well in school. I did well in school, certainly to get ahead in life, but mostly to not disappoint my parents. How could I disappoint my parents for all that they went through and for what they did for us? Sent the two of us to the university. We had all the educational experiences that we wanted, that we needed, piano lessons, cheder, Hebrew school, There wasn't anything when it came to education that they wouldn't find the money for. Didn't always have fancy clothes. Didn't always have a car. Didn't buy me a car when I was 16 years old. We didn't have the money to do that. Shared my dad's car. But we had what we needed. We had tremendous love in the family in their own way. And he kept my mother going all those years. She couldn't have made it on her own. And the proof was in the pudding. My parents died, about 22 years ago. My father died 22 years ago. My mother died almost 6 months to the day after he died of a broken heart. Found a way not to live and couldn't live without him. They were inseparable. Anyone that knew them, they used to walk to the synagogue hand in hand. They were truly inseparable. So the survival process continued, and it continues on. I think in all of these people that survived and the next generations to come, it's about survival. It's about doing as well as we can, being successful in life, and to honor my father in a big way, to do the right thing as he tried to feed those that were in need in the camps with the bread that he could bake, and tried to save lives. In fact, the Jews generally in the concentration camps, when they had someone that was dying or very, very ill, would give up their food so that that individual would have food. This was what I went through my whole life. I'm not thankful for the occurrences. I'm not thankful for what happened in any way, but I am thankful for the parents that I have, that I had and still have today, and for the influence on me. And it's really molded my life in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing that remarkable story, and it's a testament to the human spirit that that his parents survived and that he has thrived, and it gives us hope that we have our own internal power and resilience and fortitude and strength to be able to overcome the harshest and cruelest of fates, to endure and to not let hate overcome our lives and dictate the way that we live in this world. So thank you again, Alan. And we now continue with the Aleinu on page 586, if you happen to be following along in our prayer books. Please rise in body or in spirit.
Aleinu lishabeach la'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומשה יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו, בגבהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, היום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני, אחד ושמו אחד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני, אחד ושמו אחד. אחד ושמו אחד. אחד ושמו אחד.
We continue with the introduction to the Kaddish prayer for those who have died. We have lived in numerous towns and villages. In too many of them we have endured cruel suffering. Some we have forgotten, others are sealed in our memory, a wound that does not heal. 100 generations of victims and martyrs, still their blood cries out from the earth. And so many at Dachau, at Buchenwald, at Babi Yar, and what can we say? What can we do? How bear the unbearable, or accept what life has brought to our people, to many peoples? All who are born must die, but how can we compare the slow passage of our time with the callous slaughter of the innocent, cut off before their time? They have left their stories and their lives to us. Let a million prayers rise wherever we worship. Let a million candles glow against the darkness of these unfinished lives. Sanctifying the name of God, we do honor to their memory. And we think now of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at the season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. We recall Paul Kramer, who died during this past month, and we add to his name the names of those whose yahrzeits or anniversary of whose deaths occur this week. Leon Weidman, Edwin Dauber, Philip Stone, Lori Rittenberg, Louis Halpern, Batya Klein, Irving Harrow, Daniel Rosenbaum, Lillian Guber, Herb Gindlin. And at this time, if there are names of others, and at this time we add the names of those who died because of this horrible virus, and all of those who died trying to save others, and anybody else who you would like to personally have in your heart and your mind at this moment. Please feel free to remember them personally at this time. And we now continue with the Kaddish prayer. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'yizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach l'olam olmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who causes peace to reign in the high heavens cause peace to descend on us, on all Israel, on our country, and all the world, as we say together, Amen. Now I'd like to introduce Josh Levine again, who's going to lead us in the Kiddush, the blessing over the wine, and the Motzi, the blessing over the bread.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Hello, I'm Martha Duffield, and I am representing the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Burlington in solidarity with the Jewish community. On the occasion of Yom HaShoah, we pause to remember the 6 million lives taken and to reflect on the difficult times. We also recognize the descendants of survivors, the generations who remember and move forward with tradition. Our communities have struggled with totalitarian regimes, violence, and the silence of our neighbors. We come together to feast together, remember, and build communities based on shared values between the Jewish community and our Asian families. Reverence for education, community, and our elders. We pause also to remember the members of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, made up of second-generation Japanese Americans, who shot the locks off the gates and liberated Dachau while their own families were interned in camps in the United States. We remember the many other Chinese, Filipino, and Korean Americans who fought the Axis while having their own loyalty questioned at home. Through the generations here in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world, our communities have been victims of stereotypes and assumptions. We have been dehumanized, facing senseless internment, violence, and genocide. Despite the barriers and discrimination we have faced, our communities remain strong as our survivors carried on sacred traditions and values. The AAPI community thanks you for the opportunity to honor those who have faced unfathomable injustice, and we will continue to stand with and cherish our Jewish brothers and sisters. Shalom.
Friends, as our service draws to a close, I offer this prayer written by Reverend Darcy Roque as a benediction. There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us lives in a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world a more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day. Amen.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God our Creator. Peacemakers we will be. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there